Hey everyone, Sam here at Model Chili Scale Models, back with Hobby Boss's HMS Astute class nuclear submarine in 1 to 350 scale. So that is going to be a relatively tiny model kit. So here's the main hull in the plastic there. And should be quite a relatively simple build. Just putting a few bits together. Here's the lower hull, stand, instructions, photo etch, and a few decals there, but we'll get a closer look at those as we progress through the build. And this video has been sponsored by the awesome folks down at Iron Horse Hobbies, Christchurch's best local hobby store, and they've got a really fantastic range of model ships, boats, submarines, and all other scale model kits. So, and a big thanks to them for making this build possible. So let's get started. So looking closer at these parts, there's a quite obvious moulding seam or line down the middle there, which I'm going to want to remove. And there's a little bit of it on the upper hull at the front, and nothing at the back. Yeah, pretty minor fix up there, shouldn't be a problem. I just want to avoid sanding over all of this detailed area, so just the front and then all the way down the middle. Alright, it's a pretty nice tight fit. I think I'm going to need to just clean up this tiny little lip from the lower hull, but that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Just a little bit more sanding, but there's no filling required, so that's always a plus. So now that construction is done, it's time to start laying on some primer. I'm going to use Vallejo black primer. Right, so with the black primer down, it's time to start building up all of the many layers of panelling and the hundreds, if not thousands, of sonar absorbing rubber tiles, and then the weathering and streaking and more detailed panels. So first I need to give it a little bit of texture by spraying over some lighter colours, a darker grey that's just a little bit lighter than this black. And before I do that, I'm just going to lay on some masked tile shapes, because the rubber tiles for this sub are really small at this scale. It'll be really hard and tedious to try and mask off or even scribe thousands of tiny little panels. They're all like little square panels, especially on the conning tower. You can see on photos there's just hundreds of them, really small tiles. So I'm just going to try and do the impression of patches of tiles. So it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it'll give the surface a little bit more texture than just plain black. So I've got laid out some masking tape here. I've got 2mm strips, 5mm strips, and I've just cut them into squares and rectangles. So now I just need to lift off one of these. And carefully place it, try and get it as straight as possible. Like that. So I'm just going to cover the sub in all different shapes and sizes of these panels, and then give it some light misting. So it'll have the light mist spray, but once I take off the masking tape, there'll be all these black panels everywhere. Right, so here's the first layer of masking tape. Try to be nice and random for each side there. So the next step is to get some black paint and lighten it up very slightly with a bit of dark sea grey. And then just do a kind of a misting over all the tape. So the mix I ended up using was 2 parts black to 1 part dark sea grey, just to give a really nice dark grey. Subtle variation, and I sprayed it in, tried to keep it in bands to mix it up a little bit. And I've got some areas where it's heavier coating and some lighter coating, so hopefully that'll pay off later on. But now for the next layer is where we get a little bit crazy, and that's to add some German red brown to the black. Now looking at a lot of reference photos, there are quite a few patches where there's a little bit of reddish brown that shines through. I don't think it's rust, I think it's just the way the light catches a lot of these panels. But before I put on this layer, I'm just going to cover a few more panels so I can retain some of the grey and mix up the panel colours a little bit. Alright, so I've added a bit more tape, and so for the next layer I'm going to do another dark grey. But this time with the black I'm just going to mix in a little bit of this medium gunship grey. Alright, so with all those layers down, now it's time to start pulling off all of this tape. Hopefully it was worth it. Right, so that's how it looks with all of the tape off, and yeah, I'm mostly happy with that. It's maybe come off a little bit more subtle than I was expecting, although some panels are quite light. Really just depends what angle you're looking at it. Some of the panels really pop. Sometimes they just kind of disappear and blend in. Hopefully they'll remain as visible once the clear coats go over the top. But yeah, I think that was worth it. There's a couple of little nicks where the primer was pulled off for some reason, along with the tape. But I'll clean those up just with another quick mask and a blast with the airbrush just to hide those. And then I'm also going to mask off these passive arrays and paint those the red brown darkened with the black. Right, so that's the red brown gone down, but I've had a bit of a disaster, and yeah, the tape that I put on to mask up and paint over the little bit that the tape had pulled off earlier, well, that was this bit here. So I masked that off, painted it, lifted the tape up, and it pulled off even more paint. So I'm not quite sure what's going on. I've never had this Tamiya masking tape just pull paint off so easily. It must have been something on the surface of the kit that didn't quite clean off correctly, or yeah, I don't know, maybe this primer. This is a new bottle of Vallejo primer, and it's usually alright, but for some reason this kit is just, it's just not sticking. So anyway, I've got the message. I'm not going to be using any more masking tape because I just feel like it's going to pull even more paint off. So yeah, it's a bit of a bummer. Although it kind of looks kind of natural, almost like weathering or some kind of scarring. So what I'm going to do is just brush paint on black over these exposed parts, the primer, and then just hand paint on the red brown. It's going to look a bit patchy and a bit rubbish, to be honest, but yeah, I'm too scared to mask it off again, so I'm just going to have to live with it and move on. There we go. It's a bit of a mess, but I'll just put it down to weathering. Right, so before I do any more brush painting or weathering, I need to apply the decals. So first I'm going to coat the boat in some gloss varnish. So now that the decals have been applied and set with a bit of microsol, I'm just going to start adding a little bit of streaking using various colours down the hull, just taking inspiration from several photos I've seen of it in dry dock, so I'll be using those as a guide to apply all the streaks and patches that you can see all over the boat. Alright, so that's all of the streaking applied, and the propeller some painted gold. Now I'm going to apply a dark grey wash to some of the details along the top. Now, according to some reference images, it looks like this ring here has the same white marking as the ring back here, which I had a decal for, but which the kit didn't provide for some reason. So I'm just going to try a little bit of whitewash in the recess around it and see if that works. I'll probably just have to build it up a few layers. And again, looking at reference material, there's just a tiny little bit of rust patches on the top surface of this forward area, so along some of these hatches and joins in the hull. So I'm going to use just a bit of rust wash, just a little bit for these bits. And some back here. Of course, it's going to be really hard to see over the black. So I guess it's just going to be really subtle. Yeah, something like that. If I just blob it up a little bit, start to see it a little bit easier. Right, so I actually really liked how the whitewash looked on that ring. So I went ahead and added it to some of the other recessed details. Because as it dries it goes really light grey and then almost kind of disappears unless you add more layers. And I just think it looks far more interesting than the dark grey wash that I put in there, which kind of really disappeared into the recess. I just think the white, as it dries into light grey, just makes all the details pop a lot more and indicates a little bit of wear and tear and staining, salt water drying up, leaving just bits of crusty bits on the hull. And I'll clean it up a little bit once it dries to get rid of some of these tide marks, but yeah, pretty happy with that. And along the top there, and also it'll make the rust shine through just a little bit easier, especially like here I put a little bit of rust on where the white went there. And yeah, so I might just carry on adding the whitewash just to some more lines. I did a little bit around where the conning tower meets the hull there. Yeah, so here it's pulled up a little bit and just looks a little bit like weathering and stuff drying on the hull, which I think looks pretty good. Right, so I've added the whitewash to a lot of the panel lines over the hull, and that's not to replicate any specific detail, like some of these markings for example. It's just to break up the monotonous black dark grey tone of the sub, and just to bring out all of the detail, just so your eye catches it, and hopefully to replicate how the sub looks as it moves through the water and catches the light. It highlights all of the different panels and shapes all over the hull. So yeah, but yeah, once it's dry I'll go back and clean up some of these to make them a bit sharper. I just continue to work my way around both sides. Now to clean up some of these edges, I've just got a firm, sharp, pointed cotton swab here. Just get that a little damp, and the water-based wash will just wipe away nicely. And I'm just going to add a little bit of detail to the bottom, even though you won't really see it once it's on the stand. I'm just going to apply a lot of the whitewash kind of to where the water or the weathering would naturally gather at the bottom. So again, this is kind of pretending it's in dry dock. It certainly wouldn't look like this when it's in the water, I assume. And I'll clean all of this up again once it's all dry. Alright, so that's the first layer done. Now I'm just going to do a second layer, just a little bit more concentrated down the middle. I've left the two holes for the stand at the base just because I might replace the stand later on with something a bit more solid. And it's just handy to keep the two holes there for something to drill into for a more permanent base. And so as that layer is starting to set, I'm going to add a little bit of the oiled earth wash, which is kind of a dark grey with a little bit of brown in it. So let's see how that looks. So now I'm just trying to clean up some of these hard edges, but also create a little bit of streaking. It's kind of tricky getting it on camera because the gloss coat reflects a lot of the light back, but I think it's pretty much getting to where I want it. I mean, I have no idea if this is totally realistic. Just wanted it to look like it had been sitting out in the dry for a little bit. Just a lot of reference photos I've seen of it in dry dock. It looks quite patchy and a little bit messy. So I'm just imagining this is where all the water from rain or whatever is gathered at the bottom. And the brown isn't necessarily rust, it's just, well, no particles in the air, pollution, just a little bit of grime. Hopefully when the flat coat's down it'll be a lot easier to see all of this without the light shining on it. Yeah, the oiled earth helped a lot, adding a bit of colour to the white. Alright, so I think I'm finally done with all of the streaking and weathering. And yeah, so now it's time for a flat coat. And for the flat coat, I'm going to give it a coat of Tamiya's Flat Clear from a can. Right, so to finish off the build, I went and bought these 350 scale figures online, 3D printed, and yes, they are Imperial Japanese Navy figures, simply because I just couldn't find US or Royal Navy sailors at a good price. These are relatively cheap, and I figured that they're such small scale that you're not really going to know the difference once I paint them up. So I'm just going to use some of these neutral posed figures here, standing. Definitely not the ones getting disciplined or running up ladders. So let's check it out. So these are all the different poses as seen on the box. Yeah. And yeah, so this brand is Bunker Studio. I had these shipped from China. So they were about 20 New Zealand dollars, which isn't much really. As you can see, these are absolutely tiny, but importantly, they're just really finely detailed. The last time I bought 350 scale figures was back when I did the Carry Enterprise about 10 years ago. And I ended up buying a mix of Tamiya 350 scale figures on a sprue, which were less detailed, just really kind of blobby. I mean, you'd never get this kind of detail in an injection moulded kit. I mean, these guys here with their arms up. Yeah, and I also used like photo etch figures for the carrier, and they were just flat. But this year you get the 3D and just the really fine sculpt. Heads and arms all in proportion. They just look really, really good. So yeah, I'm a little bit behind on the old 3D printed side of things, but slowly catching up. And yeah, really impressed with these, so hopefully they hold up once I start removing them and attaching them to the Submarine. I'm just going to glue them on the top next to the conning tower. Alright, so I've pulled out a couple with their arms behind their back, and I'll glue these to the top of the Submarine and then go ahead and paint a few details. So there they are, standing to attention, and I've got a guy reading a map in the front, or a book or something. And the glue has frosted up a little bit, just a little bit of CA glue put on the base there, but I can just paint over that when I'm painting the figures. And so there's the figures all painted up. I just used a little bit of flesh colour for the faces, and some white for their collars and patches, then a little bit of blue down the front, just to match some of the reference photos of sailors standing on the sub. But if you look really closely, they still kind of look like Japanese uniforms, but from a distance they look kind of generic, so I'm happy with that. But with those attached, that's this project wrapped up. And yeah, overall I'm pretty happy with it. The paneling didn't really have as much of an effect as I thought. It just kind of disappears, especially when you're looking at it on this angle. You can kind of see them in different places, and it does kind of help to break up the overall paintwork, but yeah, they're very subtle, a little bit too subtle I think, especially for the effort that I put into painting them, or masking them. And yeah, it really just depends on the angle that you're looking at it. Like, from certain angles the weathering pops out quite nicely, and all of the details and stuff, but when you're looking at it like flat on, it looks kind of a little bit flat. But yeah, it was a fun experiment. I've never done one of these before, so it was just nice to try out all the different washes and streaking techniques to try and bring out some of the detail. I mean, you can just kind of paint these dark grey or black and just be done with it, as they tend to look in the water. But I wanted to try something that looked a little bit more interesting. And yeah, I didn't really bother with the photo etch, especially with the propeller. It just didn't really seem worth it. It was too small, too fiddly, and you didn't really see it much anyway. And I would have had to have painted over it once I'd sprayed everything. But yeah, as always, let me know what you think. If I was to do another one of these, I'd probably invest more in getting some more appropriate figures, and probably look at more effective ways to do all of the rubber tiles. I have seen people etch them, take the time to etch each one, which can't imagine how long that would take, the patience you would need to do that. I think it's probably a little bit beyond my skill, just to keep straight edges all over the place. But yeah, it would look, I think, considerably more realistic if you managed to do that. Oh, and I think I did forget to mention that there was a decal. One of these markings was supposed to be on the back there, like it is on this side. But as I placed it down, and I was working my way around the submarine, and I went to check back on it, and it had just completely disappeared. I don't know if I accidentally got it stuck to my finger or it fell off or what, but I spent quite a while trying to find it on the bench, and it just was nowhere to be seen. So it was just one of those phantom decals that had enough of existence and just disappeared on me. So fair enough. But anyway, the rest of the decals went down pretty nicely. Alright, so that completes another build. Happy to hear your thoughts, questions or suggestions. If you've done one of these submarines, if you're planning to do one, then let us all know, and I'll try my best to respond to all of your comments, questions, feedback. And I need a new turntable because this is just getting a bit noisy and old. There's the switch. And again, a big shout out to Iron Horse Hobbies for sponsoring this build. They're an awesome team with an awesome shop, and they're pretty active on social media, so I'll put a link to their site and Facebook and Instagram in the comments, so you can go check out what they've been posting. Alright, so I think that's enough waffling from me, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next build. Cheers.